Gino Barbaro, welcome to the Capital Raiser Show. I'm super excited to have you on here. I've been following your podcast, the Wheelbarrow Podcast. One of the things that I'm most excited about having you on the show is that you have a successful marketing campaign where everybody learns from you, from your podcast. And then on top of that, you have a coaching program. You have thousands of students across the nation. You have a nice real estate portfolio, 1,400 units. I don't want to steal all of your thunder, but welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you go about your business in terms of multifamily syndication.
Ruben, just want to say first and foremost, thanks for having me on. I miss my partner, Jake. He's a big component to my success. I started out in real estate a long time ago when I had my restaurant. I had a little small Italian restaurant in New York. Had it for over 20 years with my father and my mom and my brother. It was a mom and pop, people that we buy from now. Had no systems, but it was that nice little place where we made a lot of money. We were doing really well. 2008 comes along. Great recession hits. I'm sure, Ruben, you were affected by it. I was affected by it, and everyone was affected by it. Buying habits, we can get into the millennials about buying homes and all, but that definitely took a big dent in a lot of people's psyche. And I said to myself, I need to do something. I can't do this. I have 6 children. I said, I need to be able to feed those 6 mouths, right? So real estate just looks like an option for me, but let me get into it part-time. I don't want to get into the fix and flip. I've got a job already. So when I first got into it, I said, let me see if I can make a couple $1,000 a month more in passive income. Bought a couple deals with my brother in New York. Did not do well with those deals. I bought a mobile home park, and it wasn't the deals. It was me. I didn't have the due diligence. I didn't have the education. Did pretty bad with those deals. I said to myself, I want multifamily because I know that's where we can grow. That's where we can scale. So I ended up getting coached by a Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I went to one of his programs. Then I went and sought out another mentor. So I spent a lot of money. I say I spent, but I consider it invested. I invested a lot of my money into education. And back in 2011, my partner, Jake, was living in New York. He was a pharmaceutical rep. He was doing drug orders out of our restaurant. And Jake's like, I'm leaving New York, the craziness of New York. And it was crazy back then. You think it's crazy back then. It's even crazier now. He leaves in 2011, takes us about 18 months to find our first deal when he gets down there. Everyone says, well, there's no deals now. When you're getting into it, it's difficult. You have Stenziano and Barbaro in Tennessee, not the easiest bunch to get along with brokers. You're trying to make relationships. And it took us 18 months, but we found that first deal. And as I was doing that, I'm still working at the restaurant. I'm still working 50 hours. I'm putting time into the real estate. And I said to Jake, this first deal, this is great. I like the numbers down here. And the funny thing is, once you get into your first deal, the momentum happens where the second deal pops up 3 months later. All of a sudden, we've got a 25 unit and now a 36 unit. And we're saying to ourselves, this is real. Let's focus on this. And 6 months after that, our third deal, we got 136 units. So within, the first year, we have 200 units under our belt. Jake created the first complementary stream of revenue that we like to call. We created the property management company. So we're managing our own assets. We're learning what we're doing. We're fumbling around. We're committing. We're winging it like everybody else. And within 6 months after that, Jake decides to leave his pharmaceutical job and goes into real estate full time. Me, on the other hand, I'm still stuck at the restaurant, and I'm saying to myself, what is my next move? Should I go and should I do real estate full time, or should I just stick with the restaurant and know what I feel comfortable? At that point, I think was the pivotal moment in my life where I decided to go to life coaching school. Not because I wanted to become certified in life coaching, but because I wanted to know what my next step was. And for anybody out there, just Google life coaching, because most of us don't value it, but it is what is going on in our minds. It's 80% psychological and 20% mechanical. We can all figure out cap rates, cash on cash returns. We can all figure that out. But most of us get in our own ways. We have energy blocks. We have limiting beliefs. All of that I really spent the next 8 months working on myself. Once I worked on myself, I became word clear. I had clarity on what I wanted. And what I wanted was to help other people. I couldn't help enough people at one little restaurant. I couldn't transition into a business because I had my brother. So I said to myself, Jake, let's do this full time. So I ended up at that point saying, all right, let me give a runway where I can leave the restaurant, give myself a little bit more income. And within 6 months after doing that, in October of 2015, I said, I'm going to quit the restaurant. I'm only going to work on the weekends, I told my brother. And then 6 months after that, March of 2016, I left for good. And then after that, I spent another year in New York. ended up moving down to Florida in June of 2017. I actually moved to Florida because I wanted to buy multifamilies down here in Jacksonville.
Mm.
And, and Ruben, you know it. You hear all the experts saying it's too expensive, it's overbought. I wish I had bought back in 2017. We didn't. We continued to buy Knoxville. We're in Louisville now. We're in Kentucky and also in Lexington, but I didn't. So I ended up moving down a little bit farther down to St. Augustine. And now it's funny, my brother's leaving New York and coming down here. So that's a long answered question, but I just wanted to give the viewers an idea of, I didn't have a background in real estate. A lot of people don't need a background in real estate, but what they need to do is they need to take their education seriously. My wife gave me a lot of latitude. She had a lot of faith in me, but at the same point, she knew that I was working multiple hours a week, doing 3 podcasts a week, talking to brokers, underwriting deals, going down to Knoxville, looking at deals, walking deals, putting in LOIs, raising capital. All of that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. But if I wasn't clear on why I wasn't doing it, I would have quit. I just didn't quit. Jake and I are not quitters. We're not the smartest guys in the world, to be completely honest with you. It's not rocket science, but you just need to have that clarity. You need to be strong. You need to know why you're doing it.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of mindset. And you don't need to cry to me about not buying enough property. We were taking down stuff during the crash at $20,000 a unit. And if I had kept a lot of those properties, I'd be a mega million. Well, not a mega million. I'd be doing pretty good right now. But I flipped them all and made my little profit. And now everybody that kept those deals are doing really good. They're raking in. Anyway, so there's a couple directions I can go here, but I'm very curious about one specific thing that I heard you talk about on a different podcast, which was that when you were in the restaurant business, you had some people telling you, some family members telling you not to invest, and you were actually on the hush hush with your mom about the multifamily investing that you were doing.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think a lot of us have these people that are saying, like, don't get into in real estate, don't get into multifamily. It's too big, it's too crazy, it's too scary. And I know that they're trying to protect us, but tell us about your process of going through that.
Well, for me specifically, it was we had lost money in those deals back in '04 and '05, and my mom had kept telling me, one of the things with life coaching is it's great to acknowledge your mistakes, right? I mean, you're in therapy and life coach. Therapy is a little bit different. Therapy is like, let's dwell on the past. Let's see how we can fix it. As far as a life coach, if you're, I was fine. Nothing wrong with me mentally. I said to myself, let go of that mistake. That happened in the past. Let's look towards the future. And a lot of people can't do that. They dwell on that mistake. Listen, I lost between those 2 deals about 400 grand. Jake and I have refied $9 million in the last 5 years. So do you think I'm ahead of the game by a few million bucks? So that's the way I looked at it. I made a mistake. Let me learn from that mistake. Let me learn what the opportunities are. Let me learn how to deal with that. And then just not going out and sharing that with her. Because what I would hear from my mother was, you've got mouths to feed. You're taking a risk. You don't know what you're doing in this. And we've lost money already. And we have to play small and stay safe. And all she was doing was trying to protect me, right? She didn't know the unknown. We fear the unknown. So for me to crush the unknown, I needed to get coached. I needed to get more education. I needed to get more experience. And then there comes a point when you have all of that, when you know about 80% of what you need to know, that's when you commit and then you figure it out. And, the one thing that gave me, I guess, a lot of, just a lot of strength in what my decisions was partnering with Jake. It gave me a lot of confidence to do that because he was the ultimate partner that I wanted. He was great. He was a hard worker. No excuses. He had clarity in what he wanted. We had very similar visions of what our futures were. We weren't the shiny object syndrome. It's like what Jake likes to say, we stayed in our own lane. We stayed with multifamily. We aren't in Bitcoin. We aren't in mobile home parks yet. We're not in RV parks yet. We were really good at the lane of multifamily. And, funny, I went and bought a couple of deals in Rochester, New York, a couple of duplexes. I loved it there because it was a cash flowing market. I just couldn't scale up. So nobody knew about me going in there, but I got really good experience about how to deal with property management, how to deal with investments outside my market. I sold those deals and then I transitioned. I had about 200 units before I told almost anybody what I was doing. And once I told them, they identified me as the pizza guy. Then they're like, multi, how did you do that? And it's like that overnight success. Right now, everyone's like, how did you, it's not an overnight success. It's years and years of planning and toiling and making those tough decisions. Because when Ruben, the night before you're going through a deal and you're signing the documents, you get that sick stomach feeling in your stomach. You're like, should I do it? Should I not do it? So not sharing with people who are important in your life, it's a difficult decision. But if that's what it takes not to get that negativity and not to get that fear, I guess, even bigger, that's what I ended up doing. And then once I did, she's like, well, how'd you do that? Well, let me know. So she's actually coming to my first event this year. She hasn't been to either one of my events. So this
Oh,
is the first
nice.
year that my mom is coming. So yeah, it should be exciting.
Yeah, Gino, actually, I get a different feeling when I'm at the closing table. It's a very adrenaline spike. I'm just like, oh, I live off of it.
Uh-huh.
When I'm like, I mean, it's so hard for me to conceive. I've struggled to own real estate, and then when I'm at the closing table and I'm like, oh wow, I own multifamily. It's just like, it's very, very exciting. I want to
Mm-hmm.
go into a specific topic about. So I had a gentleman on my show, and he was raising money for 100 unit plus properties.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing it not through syndication. He was doing it through joint venture.
Mm.
And I heard some of your podcasts talk about how you were doing it kind of like that, but it took you a while to get into syndication. You were doing multifamily, but not the syndication way. So I kind of wanted to compare and contrast to see, um, do you think that joint venturing for larger properties is something viable for certain people in certain situations? And why do you like the syndication process? Because that's the one that you're doing right now. Yes.
Yeah, sure. So let's go into, I think one of my coaches likes to call it the three pillars of real estate. So when you're looking at a real estate and looking at a deal, you need to know these three pillars. You need to know the market cycle, you need to know the exit strategy, and you need to know the debt component. So when we talk about the market cycle, certain strategies work in certain market cycles. When you buy the refi and roll, like Jake and I did in the beginning, that really works in the beginning of the market cycle. When you're going into recovery, recession, because you're buying these assets at a lower price per unit, you're able to add the NOI, the values go up, cap rates are coming down, you can refi that money out. So in the beginning, Jake and I did no syndication. So we just started out, me, Jake, and my brother Mark bought the first deal together. On our second deal, we brought in another partner. We bought that deal internally, and up to the first 1,000 units, we bought all of our deals internally. Just me, Jake, and my partner Mike, the three of us. We refied out money. We roll it back into another deal. Now, can you do that now? We bought a deal last year in December internally because it wasn't a syndicatable deal. A syndicatable deal for us means we want a momentum play. We want to be able to give at least an 8% preferred rate of return to our investors. So the heavy lift for us, it's better if we take it. There's much more risk involved. There's a much bigger payout if you convert and you connect. But if you don't, do you have the types of investors where you can say to them, hold off for 18 months. We're not going to give out any, preferred rates of return. You're going to get on the back end. We don't have those investors yet. We've trained our investors for preferred rate of return for a 5 to 7 year hold. So it really depends upon the makeup of the partnership. We like to buy the stuff internally. We're vertically integrated, so we manage our own assets. We control our own portfolio. So for us, it really depends on those three principles: that market cycle, the debt, and the exit strategy. Our exit strategy, basically, we bought was to hold forever. I mean, that's pretty silly because we didn't know when we were first buying, right? But now, for instance, we bought a deal back in 2014 for 37,000 a unit. It was a 16-unit deal. 8 of those units were selling, this month at 108,000 a door. So, I mean, can you hold on to that? You can hold on to that, but the return on equity from what we've built up, it's minimal, it's minuscule. So I'd rather, take a gain on that and replace that and purpose that into another asset. So really, depending on your exit strategy, that's the model that you like to have. We want to hold for as long as possible. We'll refi the money out and we'll repurpose it into another deal. And we like to cost segregate it also. So if we can do that, we can buy these great assets and we'll take them down. The syndication model, it involves a little bit more of the fix and flipping. Basically, you want to buy this asset, hold it, try to get an IRR for your investors, and within 36 months or 4 or 5 years, probably go out and sell that deal. If you can, it's part of the debt component. Can you put supplemental debt on that? That's one of the strategies that you can do also, but it all depends on what your investors are looking for. So it really depends. For us, we didn't syndicate in the beginning. We didn't know syndication back then. It wasn't as popular as it started to get in the 15s and 16s and 2017. And we were just afraid of taking money from investors, to be completely honest with you. Once we got comfortable, we did our first syndication last year, November. It's coming up on a year that we closed on our first syndication. And within a year, we've been able to raise over $10 million. So once you start, like I said, we started small with our first syndication. It was only a $6 million deal. We only had to raise about $2 million. I mean, for us, it wasn't huge because we could have written the check ourselves if we had to, but it's like ripping off the Band-Aid. Just start and just go it. Syndication is one tool in the toolbox. You can either partner, take it down yourself. go with the syndication route, or you can even raise money for somebody else's deal. People don't even know that. You can, what the word is sub syndication. So if you're scared and you're not sure what you're doing, go find a sponsor who's really great, who you really have a lot of faith in, and possibly see if they need you to help raise capital for their deal. That's a great way to get into it. You put some of your own money into the deal and you raise capital, great way to get into multifamily, that route also. So there's so many different routes, but people don't know what they don't know. Their first thing with multifamily is too expensive. I don't have the balance sheet. And they just block themselves off. And that's a limiting belief. And listen, if I had thought that way, I wouldn't have over 1,500 units today within 5.5 to 6 years. It wouldn't have happened to me. But that's why those limiting beliefs really don't serve us. Go out there and see what people are doing. You're going to find there's a lot of people out there that are successful that started with no money.
Yeah, Gino. What's interesting is that you're trying to get into and find investors that my group currently has. We're doing syndications typically in the 18-month range. So we're going after stuff that's really beat up, and our investors have to wait for that cash flow because they get a bigger chunk of the pie, but not until we close the property at disposition time. So maybe we need to talk offline about that. But we are having some growth issues. We want to get up to 10,000 units, and right now we have 250. So we're actually changing from our model and going kind of more towards your model, which is more of a longer term buy and hold, like 5 to 7 years. And we're looking into new markets because it's so challenging to find stuff in Arizona, which is where all of our portfolio is. But I want to talk about specifically the raising capital part. There's so many. I was listening to you, and I didn't know if I wanted to talk about, can we go into 1031s and how that works, 1031 exchanges with syndication, or maybe about the legalities. There's all kinds of capital raise things. And I'm coming across a lot of people, Gino, that are starting to get dangerous, but have not taken the step into syndication. They have a few investors that they want to partner with, and they know that they want to syndicate, but they don't have their team in place yet. You mentioned something that was very sexy to me, which is why not raise capital for somebody who's already good at it instead of trying to create it yourself? Tell us about the process that you may teach your students or talk about with your students as an option for doing that, for getting into a partnership with somebody else.
So the first thing I tell everybody, especially my students, is I am not an attorney. I don't give legal advice. I have an awesome attorney. We use Kim Taylor, who's a syndication attorney. She'll get on strategy sessions and strategy calls with all our students and with anybody who wants to. She's awesome. She'll set up an operating agreement. She'll talk about the private placement memorandum, the subscription agreement, and all, because you need to be clear on that. What I tell a lot of students to get in the deal is they first have to learn about multifamily. There's so many things you need to learn before you even start thinking about buying these deals. You need to choose a market. That's the first thing that every investor needs to do. Focus on a market. Don't focus on 15 markets. Focus on 1 or 2 markets. Really learn that market well. The next thing is learn how to underwrite the deals. It's really important that you learn how to underwrite the deals and where we are in the cycle and what the expectations are. I think the next thing is start telling people what you do. Start creating an investor database, because as you know, Ruben, if you're in a 506B, which is, the Reg D, it includes sophisticated and accredited investors. You can't put a deal down and get it under contract and then go out and start soliciting from people you don't know. You need to start creating substantive relationships today. And how do you do that? Well, start a podcast. I mean, that's what we did. Jake and I started a podcast almost four years ago. We have 4 shows now a week. We have about 100,000 downloads a month on iTunes. We have one for movers and shakers, which our students are closing deals. We highlight our students. I have one called Multifamily Zone, which is me and my wife. It's about spouses working together in real estate. It's an important podcast because, one spouse wants to do real estate. The other one says it's too risky. How do you communicate with your spouse and let them know that that's your passion? That's really important. We have a syndication podcast, and we also have the Wheelbarrow Profits podcast. So we're trying to cast a wide net. So guess what happens when we have a 506C and we have a deal coming out? Those 100,000 downloads are going to hear about it. Free advertising, right? That's important to do that. Start writing blogs, start creating content, start creating a newsletter, start creating buzz. Let people know what your power base is. Your family and your friends are the first ones to know. I've got a book here. This is our second book, The Honeybee, we've written. That's
Nice.
another lead magnet. So you can start giving resources to investors, let them know. But ultimately, you have to learn how to speak to investors. You have to learn how to create a credibility book. We have something called the RAND Roadmap, about 20 to 25 pages telling people what we do, what assets we invest in. If you don't have assets, create a case study of a sample asset that you want to get down. As you can see, there's so many things you need to do, but what I think is everyone needs to do is really become crystal clear, get a brand. Our brand is Jake and Gino, and we're the RAND family of companies. We've created something called multifaceted multifamily, where we have multiple streams of revenue coming from the asset itself. Now, you don't have to go that in depth when you start, because we didn't start that way, 6 years ago, but really learn the tool of syndication by speaking to that attorney, getting clear on it, and then really learning how to invest in multifamily, and then taking that then and start raising the capital that way. You have to learn how to speak to investors. It's almost like with a broker. You have to be the salesperson. You have to sell the broker on why you need to get the deal, and you have to sell your investor on why the stock market is risky, why every other asset is risky, and why multifamily has the tax benefits, has the ability to actually, increase in value. It's a tangible asset. You can't buy it on the internet. Self-storage I think, is risky because there's so much overbuilding in self-storage. When a recession hits, you know that they're going to take a hit. You know that office space is declining. You see what's going on. People are working out of their house. You see that retail, the internet's going to crush retail in the next 5 to 10 years, in my opinion. You see all the metrics of where multifamily is going, where the millennials are going to be, renting, where the baby boomers. We have 145 millennials and baby boomers. Almost half the population is in that bracket, and those are renters. So that's the way you speak to investors and let them know why multifamily is hot. And you see the flows of money. Where the flows of money are coming from Asia, from South America. That's why multifamily is hot, because it needs a return. So as you see that, just being able to speak to investors and letting them know why you're in multifamily, I think is an important step of how to get into syndication.
So I need to ask you, how did you grow your podcast that big? I know you've been doing it over a while, but I have some of my listeners are coming on because they know I just started my podcast a couple months, and some of the content, some of the speakers are amazing. They don't know how they get on here. And I'm just like, people are more than willing to come on a podcast. Don't be afraid to start it. Everybody's more than happy to share. But give us some secrets for those guys that are wanting to start a podcast. Number one, how do you get your podcast big? And number two, is it a good idea to start a podcast?
Ruben, the most important question, like I've started from the beginning, is the clarity. Why are you starting a podcast? Jake and I didn't even know what a podcast was 5 years ago. I mean, honestly, we really didn't even know. Somebody told us it's a good idea. I wish we had thought it out a little bit clearer, because what I would have done in the beginning was, what's my podcast serving and who am I serving? So we had Jake and Gino. We called it Wheelbarrow Profits because that was the name of our education. The wheelbarrow is the symbol behind me. You can see it. It's the buy right, manage right, and finance right. That's our 3-step proprietary framework. We have the #1 multifamily podcast on iTunes, but that's why we called it. Now, maybe in retrospect, we should have focused on, why are we creating this? We were creating it for the education aspect, but maybe we should have been creating it more for the investor aspect. We didn't have the syndication piece yet there. So the name and the branding is very important. Become crystal clear on why you're starting a podcast. For me, it doesn't matter why you started. I'm able to talk to so many amazing people. How would I get a chance to talk to Cameron Herold, T. Harbecker, Robert Kiyosaki? I mean, Brian Scudamore. The list goes on and on of people that I've talked to on the podcast. I've spent hours with on the podcast. Just picking their brain and being able to speak to them is worth a podcast. Even if I don't monetize the podcast at all, just that 1 or 2 hours a week, being able to speak to such high-level people is amazing. That's where the benefits of podcasts are. Now, if you get to be really big, we've been doing this for 5 years, so it's taken a long time. Size. And for me, it's not the number of downloads. For me, it's the number of people that listen to our message, that want to click through and want to join the community, and actually help people out. But for me, just really become crystal clear on why you want to start a podcast. And then once you do that, it's great. It's hard because you have to start, soliciting other people to come on the show. But what is it about? Pick your niche and stay in that lane and own that lane. We're in multifamily, so I'm owning that lane. And like I said, the multifamily zone, me and my wife are in that lane for families. We have one for syndication. That's the lane for there. And then we have the one for the education, which is called, like I said, movers and shakers. Our students are on there telling us how great we are. So figure out why you want to do this. And then next thing is just do it. And there's so many services out there today that can help you book people, that can help you edit the podcast. So just think of it that way. Just start.
Oh, tell me who are those? Because I do a lot of my own editing. I need to
So
outsource some of that.
So editing, I mean, well, it's funny, Ruben, when we started the first 2.5 years, we were actually editing, and Jake was actually editing the podcast and doing the show notes. We found somebody online on Fiverr doing it, and now we've got people internally doing it. We've got our staff members doing it. You can go on Fiverr, go on Upwork, and find those people there to do it. It's not that difficult. And there's so many other providers out there, Interview Valet and others, that will actually find people to come on your show or actually have you go on other people's shows. So you can reach out to these providers and say, hey, I've got a show. You need anybody to get on the show? You can do that also.
Yeah, I'm at an event out here in Denver, and I'm just doing some networking. And I probably got like about 10 people already interested in coming on the show. Some of them
That's
are high
awesome.
level. Some of them are people that are just coming up. And I like to interview the guy that's doing their first syndication. I want to find out what their mindset is and why they're doing this.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, those guys are a lot of fun to speak to. I would say you can learn from them almost as much as you can from some of the guys that have been in the business for a long time. I want to dive into so many topics. Um, who was your mentor and who taught you how to invest in real estate? Let's go in that
So,
direction.
yeah. So when I first started out, I did use Rich Dad Poor Dad back in 2008, 2009. The program was pretty good. It gave us sort of framework of what to do. The tools that he had were pretty good. I ended up going into Dave Lindahl's program back in 2009, 2010. It was more of a structured program, but back then it was great. He had a lot of great content. I never went to one of his live events. That's the mistake I'm talking about. Never went to one of those, and I should have. But I still enjoyed his content. I learned from there, and then just from going out, talking to real estate brokers, talking to people in my community about multifamily. That's how I learned. I was going to meetups in my community, learning that way. And then just like I said, partnering with Jake was really a big help for me. That was my mini mastermind. I think everyone should be part of masterminds. And when you speak to a partner like 3 or 4 times a day, you enjoy speaking to him, you solve problems, you brainstorm, you learn with him, and bringing on another high level partner that really solidified it. And then ultimately creating Jake and Gino. When you learn something, you want to learn it, then you want to do it. If you really want to learn something, you end up teaching it. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I've got to really invest a lot of time into teaching this subject. And then you become a much better investor yourself. That's how I learned syndication. I podcasted probably 15 or 20 syndicators. I can name them: Matt Faircloth, I had Bruce Peterson, I had Mark Kenny, I had, all of those guys on our podcast, and they were sharing me their models and talking to them. And I learned syndication through our podcast. So I think
Wow.
you learn, do, and teach, and that's how you ultimately become a much better investor. And you learn one thing, that the market is constantly changing, and you're never an expert. Anyone who thinks they're an expert is going to be left in the dust, because with the way things move and change in this environment right now with technology and the internet, you're always having to constantly learn your craft. So teaching it is an excellent way to become a much better investor.
How far into the road of your investing career were you when you decided you wanted to coach people?
It's funny because I had started a company called Gino's Family back in 2011 with my family. What the genesis of that was I was doing cooking videos. I was growing stuff in
Mm.
my garden, picking the vegetables with my kids in the garden, bringing them inside to my house and cooking with my family. And I wanted to get people around the dinner table. I ended up writing a cookbook. I ended up doing YouTube videos. I ended up sourcing physical products. So I had a nice little brand going. Unfortunately, like I said, my brother wasn't there. So I wanted to help people from back then. And then I said to myself, I can transition and do this for our education. So after about 200 units, that third deal that we did, I said, Jake, let's start the podcast and let's write a book. And the first book we wrote, it took over a year to write the book, Wheel of Our Profits. But that was when we said to ourselves, okay, we've got something here. Let's start a community. And, the community of Jake and Gino was born in October 2015. So we've been at it for 4 years, constantly adding new students, new members. And it's a lot of fun. Coaching is a lot of fun. I think, like I said, everybody out there, there's so many different coaching programs out there, whether you want to go life coaching, business coaching, whatever it is. But it really is just helping people, asking them empowering questions and finding out what they want, not what you want. It's what they want.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned towards the beginning of the show was that mindset is a big part of multifamily investing. So, is some of what you teach mindset? How much of the focus is about mindset when it comes to multifamily?
I mean, I want to teach people the mechanics of it. It's important to teach the mechanics. It can't be all about motivation, right? Because when people come to learn, they need to learn facts. They need to learn how to choose a market. They need to learn how to underwrite a deal. They need to learn how to manage the asset, right? They need to learn all about the financing aspect of it. There's so many things they need to learn. What the academy allows and the community allows is that environment. Remember, we talked about having like-minded people. When
Yeah.
we have a private Facebook group with 800 individuals, and you have these 2-day boot camps for internal students and there's money mixers for bus tours at certain cities, that really helps people. There's the motivation there. We just had one in Nashville about 2 weeks ago. We had a bus tour with about 60 students. We rented a bus. We toured a couple assets in Nashville. Students met each other. I met the students face to face. That kind of environment and motivation is what makes people successful, holding them accountable. We're having another boot camp in November, a buy right boot camp for our students who sign up to the education. Those are important elements about it because that's going to keep you motivated, but there's also education to it also. It can't be just motivation, fluff, fluff, fluff. It can't be just setting goals. Why are you setting those goals? How are you going to get to those goals? The process of getting a deal is more important than actually setting the goal. Once you fall in love with that process and once you identify it as a multifamily investor, you're going to become more successful. That process is simple. Underwrite deals, call brokers, put in LOIs. If you don't like that process, you're never going to hit that goal. So it's important that you do that. And like I said, surround yourself with those like-minded people.
So based off my conversation with you and everything that I've heard, I want to come to your event. But for the audience that may not know about it, what can you tell us about the multifamily mastery event that you're having upcoming here later this month?
Well, it's the third event we're having. We created this event because of everything that I've spoken to. It's a lot of fun to get our students together. It's a lot of fun to get new members coming out. They're going to be listening to some amazing speakers. We have Eric Thomas there. We have Rick Sapio there. We have Cole Hatter there. Our entire team is going to be there, and we're going to be teaching on those three principles. Like I said, that framework of buy right, manage right, and finance right. It's important that when you go out to these events, you're going to be getting educated. But more importantly, I had a student who came to our first event in 2017. He said, I stayed in the room all weekend, and I just took notes, and I just learned as much as I could. He went back last year, and he's like, I never went in the room because I was outside. We had a deal room. I was outside all weekend in the deal room, meeting the vendors, meeting potential partners, and just networking like crazy. So that first year is all about education. The next year is all about networking, and you can mix both of them. So that's what's important with these live events, because people are like, oh, there's just another seminar, you're selling stuff. Well, yeah, you don't have to buy, but being out there and meeting people who are doing what you're doing and learning new techniques and new tips and strategies. If you learn one little golden nugget from that weekend, you think it's worth going and spending time with people who are successful? To me, it is. Like I said, I just kick myself for not going and for not, dramatically shortening my learning curve by going to these events. So go out there, start meeting other people in the event, and just network with people. Like I said, all of the vendors are there, whether you're looking for a laundry provider, whether you're looking for a syndication attorney, whether you're looking for a capital raiser, whether you're looking for a CPA, they're all going to be at the event. So it's a great place to meet people.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to going out there and then going to a different part of the country and meeting people on that side that are in the same business. I
Yes.
I know this is a little off topic, but I'm very curious because I wasn't aware of this, that you have a podcast called Multifamily, and it's about dealing with your spouse in this business. Now, my spouse is from Mexico, and she's very interested in passive income, and she's interested in real estate, but she can't speak the real estate language yet because it's like its own language of its own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but tell me about working with your wife and the stuff that you talk about there, and maybe some best practices for people that are in real estate or in a passive income business that are working with their wife and how they relate with that.
So it's funny. My wife does not like real estate at all. She pretty much hates it. So that's fine. But she supports what I'm doing. And I actually support what she's doing. It's important that you have that communication. And it's important that, in the beginning, I would tell her, hey, Jewel, we just, did a refi and roll. We just got a $300,000 check. And she's like, nah, that's good. She wasn't on the radar. Now she at least, sees what I'm doing and partakes in what I'm doing. And I've actually included her in the business because this is why we created the podcast. It's for part of the brand, for the Jake and Gino brand, that we're a family brand also. So including in her in that, and now she actually went and got certified, got her certification as a life coach also, and a marriage coach. So she's part of that business also. So to include spouses in the business, if you can do that, it's wonderful. I know a lot of spouses are like, I can never work with my husband. Well, yeah, you can if you want to, and if you really enjoy what you're doing, and you set out a plan, and you just don't, half-ass it like everybody else does, but really think through it clearly why you want to work together. I met my wife at the restaurant 25 years ago. That's where we met, at work, and we worked for a long time at the restaurant before we started having kids. So I like to work with her. I think communication is the key between spouses. That's something that you really have to work on and figure out why you're doing it together.
That's fascinating, man. That's great content. We got to wrap it up, man. I'm in Denver here at Adam Adams event, and it starts in 10 minutes. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. I look forward to coming out and shaking your hand and getting a selfie with you out in Orlando. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time. I consider you a little bit of an idol, and I'm starstruck to have you on here. You're fascinating and very fun, and your content is amazing. So no wonder your podcast is killing it.
Ruben, I appreciate it. Thanks. If anybody wants any more information, just go to jakeandgino.com. We've got all our stuff there. We've got our podcast there. We've got our articles there. We've got free downloads there. So just go check out the content. And one thing that makes Ruben great, he practices what he preaches. He's at an event this weekend. He's making it happen. He's on a podcast recording with me. Then he's going to the event. Then he's going to go to Chicago. Then he's going to Orlando. So Ruben is not going to be lucky. People say, oh, overnight success. No, he's putting in his hours right now, and he's putting in the work. And that's what we all need to do to become successful, because it's not going to happen to us. We have to choose to make it happen and then go out and actually make it happen. So once again, thanks, Ruben, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Those are really kind words, man. Fantastic. Thank you so much. With that, we'll sign off. Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everybody.